Retire? Are you the village comedian as well?
Le Chapeauté 2, La Dernière Quête, sort enfin au cinéma, plus de 10 ans après le premier film. Nous avons pu interviewer le réalisateur Joel Crawford et le producteur Mark Swift cet été au Festival d'Annecy. Ils reviennent avec nous sur le nouveau look stylisé de la franchise, l'animation ou encore le caractère design des nouveaux personnages.
In terms of finding the look of the movie, I really do have to hand the credit to our production designer, Nate Ragg. He really worked hard with his team to find like that perfect balance of CG, but also this painterly style. They've been trying to crack this movie for the last, how long?
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah, and so it really has been building on, very talented people at DreamWorks trying to find the right solution. And so, yeah, it just kind of came about, I'd say, after a lot of trial and error.
And I think animation keeps changing. Technologies come in, looks come in, things move on. You don't want to look exactly like you did 10 years ago, because for the audience, I think there's been so much inspiration, so much cool movies have come out during that time that I think they've moved on a little bit. So we wanted to give something new, exciting, something that people would go, wow, that looks cool.
I think audiences, they're more sophisticated in terms of not just live action, but animation. And so being able to, not just with the look of the movie, but also the storytelling of the movie, to go more sophisticated in terms of tone, in terms of humor, everything. We tried to really kind of level up.
And I think the industry, the first Shrek movie came out over 20 years ago, and it was one of the first CG movies. And I think there was nearly a race to make everything look as live action as possible, to make things look so realistic. In animation, we were going more and more realistic because we could. And now I think everyone's stepping back and going, let's try something different. Now we have more tools, let's be more artistic, let's have broader choices. So.
Kitty, may I please see the map?
No.
Seriously?
Management of studios change over times, and I think people just become more open to those conversations. Bad Guys and Puss in Boots were sort of working parallel a little bit, and I think everyone at the studio is actually really excited with the choices these two movies have done, and it's kind of opened the door, and I think you'll see more movies in the future, not just from DreamWorks, but from other studios making those choices.
And it's really cool, like, being an artist at the studio and working with all of our really talented artists. They're so excited because it's, like you're saying, the studio entrusting the creative, teams at DreamWorks and going, like, you can push it, go far with it. And it's been really cool to see how, like, the art department, the modelers, the surfacing, every department is like, oh, I can play, I can do all these things that I've always wanted to try, and it just kind of builds on itself. And so I think credit to the studio, to Margie Cohen and Kristen Lowe.
We did hear a funny remark, and it was from the matte painting team. They've never been happier on a show before. Because matte painting, they're always trying to copy a photo, nearly.
Yeah.
And now here it's like, no, do a painting.
Yeah.
Make it look cool.
It's an impression. It's not literal. And
so all the art school training is coming out, so it's been fun.
Hey, you want to see something cool?
We wanted to make sure, because it's so fun to be able to push the style, the look and the animation, but wanted to make sure everything comes back to story. Like, why are we doing this? Not just because it's different or trying to stand out and be unique. It's how does it help support the story? And for us, we really wanted to make the feeling of Puss is this larger than life. He's become kind of this legend, almost like a myth. And we want everything to feel big and fantastical, and using the stylized animation with step, where things are on 2s, 3s, 4s, it doesn't feel grounded. It feels heightened. When we use that, we put it in parallel kind of contrast to these kind of very real moments where Puss is balancing, it's this, almost, he's a cat, but his humanity. Him experiencing what the more subtle side of life, and going to ones and going to blind animation, as it's called, to have the audience feel that and not be distracted or pulled out by it, but as part of the storytelling device throughout the movie. And the animators, again, what we were talking about with the matte painting, the animators are like, oh, wait, I can, like, because I studied animation, I animated, in school, but I'm not an animator. Like, I've always done storyboarding, and so really trusting our animation team to go, when do you, like, I give them the story context, and sometimes I go, okay, this is definitely on step, but a lot of times we're letting them decide how to transition in and out, and giving them that tool and letting them push it has been just incredibly rewarding.
And they're just so excited to be able to have that freedom to experiment. It's they're another member of the team who are like, great, with these new styles, we can push things, we can have more fun. So big shout out to our lead, Ludo, who really, I think, helps us kind of decide when and when not to do these things.
Ludo Buoncho, he's amazingly talented animator who's just leading the team in a fantastic way. And my favorite thing is, as a director, I have a specific idea in mind, this vision for a sequence, a shot, a moment, but I love when I get surprised when I see the animation. I'm like, that's not how I was picturing it. That's way better. So I think that's just one of the fun surprises of everybody, bringing this creativity to the process.
Ready? 1, 2, after you.
Wait, what?
I take Goldilocks and Three Bears crime family. The fun kind of tradition in the Shrek world is it's kind of a fractured fairy tale. It's putting a spin on a fairy tale that's very common. And for us, we looked at this movie as almost the good, the bad, and the ugly. There is a spaghetti western element to it. So going, okay, with this Shrek fairy tale world and this mix of the good, the bad, and the ugly kind of spaghetti western, what should Goldilocks and Three Bears be? And I remember, Mark, you were the one who, referenced kind of a rough and tough Cockney gang.
Yeah, we were kind of, I like a lot of the Guy Ritchie movies, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, and it was trying to lens Goldilocks and the Three Bears in that world, kind of low-life criminals. And so I think in terms of the design, I love how like Papa Bear has the look of an old boxer. One of his eyes is kind of like glass, and you see, there's a few scars. You've seen he's been in a few punch-ups in his life. He's kind of lived a fairly rough life, and I love when we can bring touches in like that.
Going back to kind of the story purpose of even with Goldilocks and Three Bears, where we wanted to explore this theme of a found family, that Goldilocks found the bears, like Mark was saying, making them this rough and tough kind of gang, actually underlined this idea of families can look so many different ways. It doesn't have to be a conventional looking family. And so using the character designs to reinforce, almost build on your expectations of what the perfect little family looks like, and you're like, oh, that doesn't look like it, but there's such warmth and fun with that group.
And with the wolf, in many ways, his design sort of comes out of the spaghetti western. Like, we originally, when we were doing the scratch voice, had like a Clint Eastwood kind of type voice doing it, and then we gave him the poncho, and so he was really inspired from some of the spaghetti westerns.
And I think even the extension of that, the co-director Daniel Mercado and myself are really big fans of Akira Kurosawa movies. By extension of that, Sergio Leone movies. And so some of the early explorations, even with the wolf, were, because they're so closely related, the samurai and the gunslinger, and kind of going to, we were looking at some of like Yojimbo and Seven Samurai for like even character design ideas, which that poncho kind of had the same kind of flowing robe as like a samurai. And so we found kind of the perfect balance where, like you're saying, it fits in this spaghetti western style.
I mean, he introduced himself as a bounty hunter, and so wanted to give him that edge.
Okay, pause and face. I won't make you bad.
Co-director and director can mean a lot of things, right? When you're making this, we're such a tight-knit team with Mark, myself, Daniel Mercado was the head of story on Crude's A New Age with us. Jim Ryan, the editor, was our editor as well. And so we're kind of like this tight-knit group that, in a way, kind of driving a lot of the big choices, but Daniel's like right there by my side. And sometimes what's great is to have somebody to bounce off or challenge you on certain things where he's like, are you sure? Because story-wise, and so he's just a great partner in tracking animation, in sitting in editorial with us, and trying to just make sure each sequence is playing great. So he's kind of an extension of me.
Yeah, I've worked on movies where the directors split up responsibilities. And this movie, we didn't do that. We just moved together as a team and kind of consulted, and then we would give an answer. Joel and Januel are super fun guys to work with, and they sort of bounce off each other, and someone will give an idea and then someone will say, how about this? Oh, that's cool. How about this? That's cool. And the great thing with both these guys is two of the quickest sketch artists I've ever seen. And I would say Januel's super strength is we're sitting in editorial and we're looking at a scene and we're trying to figure out what to do with the scene. And this happens a lot. The storyboards come in and you're like, I don't know.
You're problem solving,
well,
yeah.
I'm not sure what it is. And Januel can be very quiet. And I'm going, okay, Januel doesn't, I don't know, I'm not sure. And the next minute I realize he's sketching and he'll come up with a sketch and say, this. And we'll go, oh. And he explains things visually. And sometimes it's amazing. You go, that's it. And then Jim Ryan, the editor, you saw a little bit of this yesterday, will take that sketch, shoot it, and drop it in, and maybe Joel will do a scratch voice, and suddenly we have a new idea, and it was broken through by Januel's sketch on a Post-it note sometimes, but it's so, that sketch is so indicative of the way we have to go.
I think that's a great example, because it's so much of directing is problem solving, from scenes to frames where you're going, like everything is like, okay, what's working here, what's not working. And a lot of times I'll be analyzing, and like Mark's saying, Daniel is approaching it from a different angle, and to have us both be able to attack the same problem but from different angles is just so valuable.
One more number. I call this one The Legend Will Never Die.
Here at Annecy, you showed us an impressive sequence with a drop of blood on Puss. Was it difficult to include something like this in a family-friendly movie?
Yeah, we had this conversation.
Yes.
You were right.
Yeah, because it was so important to make sure, Puss has this giant ego and this whole bravado of I've never been touched by a blade. And we're like, we really need to feel this as the audience, and for Puss to really register the fear for the first time he feels. And like Mark's saying, we definitely had the conversation with the studio, but to their credit, really trusted us to go, we're not just putting this in for shock value, we're putting this in because it really is the catalyst to the whole story, the whole engine of Puss being afraid. We're just going to be very surgical about, okay, right here is when the audience, and one of the cool things was when we were previewing, this movie, and we do with a younger audience, and then later in the day with an older audience, and it was so cool to see when that moment happens, when the blood, just that little drop, the whole audience goes, and you could feel it in the room.
The other thing I would add, and I think this goes back to the style and the techniques that we use in the film, the fact that we're doing this in nearly an abstract way, not in a realistic way, which would have been the case in previous Shrek or Puss in Boots movies, I think does enable the audience to step away from the actual blood drop and the realistic impact of what that is to more of an impressionistic version. And so I think it's easier to take because they're sort of going inside Puss's head rather than just being the shock value of the blood.
But looking at the movie as a whole, we're very conscious to make sure this movie's still a comedy, it's still a big adventure, and the end feeling people walk away with is joy. So in order to get that light, you have to feel a little bit of dark. So we made sure we're just looking at it as the big picture where we end up. And I think knowing that, we're able to do just that little drop of blood.